It was finally time. Ever since the cave was discovered in the mountain next to my hometown, I had always wanted to explore it. It was my right after all. I was the one who found it in the woods as a child, but everyone always told me I was too young to try, so I did the obvious thing and waited it out. I waited 12 years, watching the cave become a point of attraction for scientists and explorers, dreaming about being one of them someday. Barely any nights passed without me descending into those depths in my dreams, camping in the darkness, discovering new tunnels, or stumbling upon unknown cave monsters. Even in dreams, I failed to escape, yelling in futility as I got ripped to shreds. That didn't deter me. If anything, those dreams only fueled my obsession. It felt like the cave was calling out to me, a call to descend, begging me to uncover its mysteries. Now, after 12 long years, I stood in front of the cave mouth. I had prepared everything I could, my skills honed through smaller caves, and my equipment tested tenfold. This was no ordinary cave. Its true depth remained a mystery despite numerous expeditions. It felt like the cave had been saving its greatest secrets just for me. The call was louder than ever, emanating from the abyss. My internal voice reminded me of the dangers, but I ignored it. I chose to descend, this being my first time exploring a cave of this scale. I was accompanied by a team of 3 fellow rookies and 2 veteran guides. We began with a descent down a rope tied to a tree outside the entrance. One guide went first, helping us one by one. Took me 5 minutes to scale down. From there, we followed a tunnel to a narrow gap in the wall, requiring us to crawl on all fours. The 15-meter crawl was nerve-wracking but manageable with our chaperone's guidance. On the other side, I realized daylight was gone, and only our torches lit the way. The surface was out of reach. Our eyes would never adjust to the darkness without light. Thankfully, I brought extra backup lights and glow sticks. Our guides led us deeper through more shafts and tunnels, explaining landmarks and sharing their experiences. Hearing their stories, I felt a twinge of resentment. They had already explored this wonderland I felt belonged to me, yet I listened as they reassured us that caving wasn't as dangerous as people thought, unless you lack supplies, equipment, or company. After 5 hours of descending, we reached the first supply camp, a limestone chamber 1,500 feet underground. It was vast, 22 meters wide. We rested, ate, and prepared for sleep. I wondered if I'd still dream of the cave now that I was inside it. I wasn't disappointed. In my dream, I was alone, crawling through a narrowing passage that felt like a boa constrictor crushing me, just as I felt I would be suffocated. I woke up to start the next leg of our journey. We descended further, crawling through increasingly tight passages until we reached the second camp, over 3,000 feet underground. This chamber was much larger and marked the start of multiple paths we could explore the next day. The sound of water grew louder, and our guide explained it was likely rainwater finding its way into the cave. Seeing our worried expressions, he assured us it wouldn't reach us unless the entire cave flooded. He was wrong. I woke to the thunderous roar of crashing water. The guide regretfully confirmed the worst-case scenario. Water was rising far faster than expected. We had to leave immediately. While they prepared the ascent, I scrambled to decide what essentials to take. As I packed, the guide informed me the others had already started climbing. I threw on my backpack, tied my harness, and approached the shaft. The sight of water crashing down made climbing impossible. We had no choice but to descend back into the cave. We hurried into a sloping passage leading to a small 5 by 5 foot room. Catching our breath, the guide assured me we could try to reach the next camp. Relief briefly washed over me, but another feeling lingered, a dreadful realization. I wasn't relieved to escape. I was relieved to continue descending. My greed to explore outweighed my fear. As we pushed onward, crawling through a claustrophobic 9-inch tunnel, I was forced to confront the depths of my obsession. We eventually reached the next camp, It was well stocked, and the guide plotted a route back to the surface. But as he spoke of the ascent, I couldn't stop staring at another path, a tunnel leading downward. The call was back, louder than ever. That night, I dreamt again. The cave entrance to the surface shone with hope, but the downward path called to me like a haunting siren. Its cry grew deafening, demanding I enter. I woke, paralyzed with fear yet consumed by desire. Despite my guide's concern, I chose to descend alone. I avoided him, taking random turns to ensure he couldn't follow. My descent felt freeing, but I knew I was breaking every rule of survival. I ignored my fear and pressed on. After hours of walking, I paused to eat and take in my surroundings. The dripping water echoed in the damp tunnel, creating an oppressive atmosphere. Suddenly, I heard something else. A sound like rocks sliding, then shuffling. The sound wasn't human. It was uneven, like a sack of gravel being dragged. My heart raced as I called out, hoping it was the guide. The noise stopped, and my glow stick went out. Then came a feeling. I was being watched. The presence loomed at the end of the tunnel, unseen but palpable. It stayed there for hours as I sat frozen in terror. Then, just as suddenly, it moved away. The encounter left me shaken and questioning everything. I realized my fear wasn't just of the cave. It was of myself. My greed had led me here. I wanted to leave, but I didn't know the way back. The only path forward was down. Reluctantly, I obeyed the call once again. Days turned into weeks as I descended deeper, surviving on cave critters and drinking from pools of questionable water. My supplies dwindled, and my body grew weaker, yet I couldn't stop moving. The voices compelled me to continue. Eventually, I stumbled into a chamber with strange skeletons. They were human-sized but alien, with reptilian skulls and hollow, insect-like bones. The sight reminded me of the unseen creature that had spared me earlier. Overwhelmed by fear, I fled the chamber. Sliding down a muddy slope, I landed on a rocky ledge, facing a cavern so vast my torchlight couldn't penetrate the darkness. It was an abyss, silent, uncaring, and infinite. The abyss felt different from the rest of the cave. It didn't acknowledge my presence. It was indifferent, a void stretching endlessly. I walked along its edge, trying to rationalize its existence, but my thoughts spiraled into madness. After hours of walking, I found a small exit leading to a shaft. I descended, exhausted, and finally collapsed to sleep. My dreams were no longer about the cave but my life before it, a life I now desperately wanted to return to. I woke to something strange. Light. My eyes adjusted to faint illumination in the passage. Excited, I followed the tunnel until it opened into a massive underground valley. There I saw it, a city carved into the walls stretching to the surface. The city was a mix of ruins and strange architecture. Spires, pyramids, and bridges overgrown with vines. It was eerily silent, save for distant bird calls. I marveled at its scale but felt the familiar fear of the unknown creeping back. I leaned against a wall, paralyzed by the sensation of being watched. The city wasn't human. The hieroglyphs and carvings on the walls depicted monstrous, slug-like creatures with arachnid and reptilian features. I traced a path with my eyes, spotting a bridge that seemed to lead to the surface. Hope surged within me I could escape. Yet, I also felt the siren's call return, louder than ever, directing me to a mist-covered tunnel nearby. 2 paths lay before me. The ramp to the surface, a promise of freedom, and the abyss below, where the siren beckoned. I hesitated, torn between hope and despair. The call grew deafening, demanding I choose. Despite knowing the risks, despite my exhaustion and dwindling supplies, I stepped toward the misty tunnel. My torch flickered and died, leaving me in total darkness. Yet I knew my choice was made. I chose to descend.